Welcome in everybody to another episode of Cyberly. My name is Blythe Brumleve. I am your host, and this show covers the attention economy, B2B marketing, and how it all ties into the world of logistics. So if you're not already following the show or a subscriber, you can find us on various different podcasting apps, also on YouTube, just by searching Cyberly, and you'll be able to find all of our previous episodes because the previous episodes are really going to be important for today's episode because we're going to be talking about measuring the success of your recruiting efforts. We're also going to be talking with Grace Sharkey. She is the staff writer at FreightWaves, and she's going to be telling us about all of the badass marketing that she sees along in the world of logistics. And then we're also going to be hearing from Dan Foster. He's the VP of Operations over at StratusGrid, and he's going to be talking to us about the IT infrastructure that your company needs to survive now and in the future, and then also to protecting your company from these ransomware attacks that we're seeing increasingly across all different industries, across all sectors. So we're going to get some baseline knowledge of how we can protect our companies from getting, just getting access to these hackers and not getting access from them getting access to our sensitive data and the things that we want to protect from getting out into the world, and also avoiding having to pay those really like large settlements, which are about $5 million, I think was the most recent settlement that was paid to hackers. So we're going to get the lowdown on all of those things. But the first topic we're going to cover today is talking about measuring your recruiting efforts. Now, in the previous couple of episodes, we have talked about influencer marketing, especially in the driver space, and how you can use influencer marketing in order to help your recruiting efforts. And so we talked from the business side of things with Tom Augenthaler, and then we also talked to Wayne Cragg, who talked about it from the driver perspective. But this episode, we're actually going to be diving into how you can measure your recruiting efforts when it comes to properties that you own. And that property, and one of the few properties that you own in the digital world, is your website. And that's one of the more underutilized tools when it comes to recruiting, is using the information that you have on your own website in order to encourage other employees or other, I guess not really employees, but drivers that you want to recruit to come to your business, or maybe a students at a different college, maybe they want to come and join your program. Your website is really the first place that they're going to go and search. And then they're going to search your social media profiles to see what kind of a good sort of company culture that you have. But it really all starts with your website. So if you haven't explored the possibilities of your own marketing data within your own website, that's what we're going to dive into today. So this is for all my marketing analytics nerds out there. This is our time to shine. So we're going to dive into the first thing that you want to do is you really want to take inventory of where all of your marketing data sources are at. So making sure that your analytics are set up properly. One of the biggest myths out there, especially in the world of marketing, is once you install Google Analytics, which is a free platform in order to manage and monitor your website's activities, is that once you install it, you're done. That you don't have to do anything else. When the truth of the matter is more than 40% of all internet traffic is bot related. And so if you don't have certain filters set up within your Google Analytics account, you're going to be factoring a lot of data that just isn't accurate, that just isn't a good replica or a good representation of the visitors that are coming to your site. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you have filters put in place to block out as much of that bot related traffic that's out there. And I've linked in the show notes of where you can find those common bot sites. Google usually does a pretty good job of keeping a master list updated. You just need to take that master list and add it into a filter within your own analytics account. And I know that HubSpot is another really great analytics platform, but they have an option within their account that you have to actually go in and check the box to make sure that they are omitting bot related traffic that is coming to your site. So setting up those filters is really, really important. And they're going to drown out all of the noise. And so you can get that accurate data, because you won't be able to make educated decisions until you have that accurate data in place. And so next up, you also want to make sure that you have Google My Business set up. We covered this extensively in the last show about all the new features that are coming out for a free Google My Business account, which is the map listing that you see on the right-hand side of a Google search page. Now, you want to make sure that all of that information is accurate and all of that information is up to date, because one of their latest features that's coming out very soon is called the Call History Report, where somebody Googles your company and then they'll be able to click on the phone number right in that Google listing and dial your company directly. And so having those different parameters set up in place, or having those different data points set up, will really go a long way. The next one you want to do, and is one of the more underutilized, is setting up Google Search Console. And you have to do this. This is more of a you might want to get your IT team involved with this, because they have to go at the domain level, at your website's domain level, in order to verify your domain to Google that you own that domain. But the great part about it is, once you verify your domain in Google Search Console, you'll be able to see historical data from the time that you purchase your domain. You'll be able to see that historical data, versus something like Google Analytics, where Google Analytics, you're only going to be able to see that data from the time that you set up and install your analytics code. And then you're only going to see that filtered noise, that filtered data, from the time that you set up your filters and put those in place. Google Search Console is different, where you'll be able to see the historical data from your domain. And that historical data will show you the queries that people are entering into Google, and either your website is showing up for that query, for that long tail keyword, or you're not showing up for that query. And then they'll also show you which pages are showing up during a Google search, and then which pages are actually being clicked through. So you can kind of infer the data a little bit by looking at the queries report, and then looking at the page performance report, and then blending those two together in order to make an educated decision of, okay, well, this is how many times that this page appeared in search. This is the pages that show up whenever somebody enters in this query, this keyword. But then you can also see the click-through rate. If that click-through rate is less than 1%, then you have some work to do on your website when it comes to the metadata that's showing up on your site, the headlines. There's a whole bunch of different variables when it comes to that specific report, but it's a really good, useful tool to look at where the low-hanging fruit opportunities are. Because if somebody is by accident getting to your site based off of a keyword that you want to register for, that you want to rank for, then what you can do is you can go in and you can tweak that article, or you can tweak that page just a little bit to encourage more people to click through, and increase that 1%, or maybe less than 1% click through rate, and increase it just a little bit more, which that 1% an increase in click through rate could result in thousands, sometimes millions of people coming to the site. So that is one of my more favorite reports to run, is that Google Search Console report. I run it about once every 4 to 6 months, just to see where I'm ranking, and just to see where I'm getting traffic coming into my site for non-branded keywords. And branded keywords means your company name. So I don't I want to rank for my branded company name, but that's a lot easier than ranking for keyword phrases that are actually tied to problems that users are experiencing and they want to find a solution for. So keeping that in mind when it comes to Google Search Console, is you want to get somebody, whoever is in charge of your domain name, you want to make sure that that is verified within Google Search Console, because there are a lot of really good low-hanging fruit opportunities within that platform. Now, after you've set up your Google Analytics, you're making sure you're filtering out all the bot content, and then also you're setting up your Google Search Console. So then you have two different data sources to pull from. Now you can go back into Google Analytics, and you can start to set up what's called a goal or an event. A goal or an event can tell you in an analytics report how many people arrived on your site, how many people clicked on a social media link to follow you, how many people clicked on a phone number to give you a direct call, how many people filled out a form, how many people scrolled. Did they scroll halfway through your site, or did they scroll to the end of an article or a landing page that you created? Did you set up maybe a thank you page to encourage more signups to your email newsletter, or a case study that you just released? And then you have them, as soon as they download that report, then they're redirected to that thank you page. That thank you page is a goal that you can set up within Google in order to track how many people actually made it to that page, in order to say thank you to them. And then you can see their interactions across the board, of whether they left the site immediately after getting the information that they want, or if they just left completely without doing any of those goals. And so that is a really, really great sort of next level as far as analytics is concerned, because I would say that that is a little bit more on the technical side of setting up a lot of these things, but you really need to involve the creative side of your brain and the technical side of your brain because you can track up to 20 goals and analytic and events within Google for free. Now, a paid solution that I've used in the past, which makes a lot of this process a lot more easier, is called Aribi Analytics. And they, as soon as you set up the code, you can filter out all of the bot traffic. And then where the magic sort of happens is those marketing funnels that people love to see. You can set those up with ease. And you can also set up your Google goal, or not Google related, but goals and analytics. You can set those right up into your report. So if you haven't heard of Aribi Analytics, it sort of makes Google Analytics a lot simpler. And so I prefer to use both because I want to be able to set up goals and events super easy in one platform. And then I want to be able to go back to my trusty Google Analytics because that's where my first party data has lived for forever. So I want to make sure that I have that historical data while also being able to measure the current goals and the events that I'm putting out into the world. And so I kind of use both in synergies together, but you can absolutely use the free version of Google. You might just need to get, your developer or a marketing agency that you're working with. You might just have to take, a couple extra steps in order to set that up within Google itself, because it can be done, but there is a little bit more of a nuance to it, which I've also linked in the show notes in case you want to dive a little bit deeper and get that step-by-step instructions of how to set that up. So you've got your goals set up, you've got all of your reporting, sort of you take an inventory of where all of your data is coming from, you're making sure you're getting clean data. Well, what's the next step of what you can do with that data? Well, now we can make educated decisions and we can see how much of our marketing efforts are working on the site or they're not working on the site. So specifically, let's get back to your recruiting efforts, because 9 times out of 10, that's exactly what a 3PL wants to use their site for, and it's what a carrier wants to use their site for. Carriers want more drivers. 3PLs, if they're non-asset based, they want to recruit more employees and they want to be able to advertise different jobs that they have. And growing, and there's a growing importance on getting that first party data, because right now we're sort of living in the sort of, I guess, the influx of the world of the cookieless world. And we, as marketers, especially on the lazy side of things, have been blessed with a cookie world for years. But now, with growing privacy concerns and the inability to track across devices, I think it's Apple and Facebook that are actually in a very heated battle right now when it comes to the first party data of how they're sharing your information across different party apps. Facebook is very mad that Apple isn't allowing that anymore, and they're giving users the right to choose. And 9 times out of 10, if a user has the choice to choose whether they share their information with other companies or not, they're probably not going to share that. So it makes the I guess the focus of having that first party data so much more important. So diving into a sample flow of what your recruiting efforts can look like is making a landing page on your website with all of your recruiting information on the main page. Now, the graphic that we're looking at here is a sample of what I've created in the past, where if you notice that the red phone number, the red email, the share buttons on the page, if you look at the bottom of the page, how to apply, email us, click to call, apply now, all of those buttons are being tracked in Google Analytics. It's being tracked in a Google goal with a Google event, because that will tell me, is somebody looking at this ad and where are they clicking? Where are their eyes going? Are they emailing this job to a friend or are they applying themselves? All of this information will tell me that, and I have it in a couple different areas of the page. And so I can look at a report, I can put out a new job listing out to the world, and then I can see how that page is performing. This page acts as a blog post, and it's a template that you can build over and over again, and depending on the type of job that you're looking for, the type of job that you're looking to fill. And so if you notice at the very bottom how to apply, somebody can email you directly. That email goes right to somebody on staff, probably your HR department or, somewhere else. But there's also an option within that platform that has a quick application. Now, a lot of different companies will use a tool like 10th Street, and they are great. They make the ease of applying for drivers much more easier because they store a lot of their data, and it's a quick way to get drivers to apply to a new job if they're looking. But this tactic too, having a mini application, which is essentially just a mini form on your site that's tied to a Google goal, you're able to now capture that information, that driver, that employee recruiting information, you capture it on your owned platform. And then once they apply in the mini application, once they hit send, they're redirected to 10th Street, or they're redirected to another application provider should you have that capability set up with another third party. The way that this works is that you still capture that first party data without having to rely on a third party source. Third party sources are great and they can be used in a variety of different marketing ways, but this is really your the best bang for your buck, because then you know within your own data of how that job post is performing. And so what that method allows you to do, if you just build a simple application on your website, is in that way you can then take that blog post, which is essentially a job listing, and you can send it out to all of your social media platforms. You can also, if it's set up and programmed correctly, you can tie in with different API integrations that various different job boards already have. I know ZipRecruiter, I think it's like Glassdoor or something like that. They're Google's job board, and a variety of other job boards out there will allow this API integration to take place. So you can publish a job listing directly on your site and then take that same data, and it automatically sends out through an API connection to all of the different job boards that allow it, that have that capability. But you're still taking advantage and still owning your first party data, which is incredibly important. And so now, because those job posts are created or treated as a blog post, you have a custom URL that you can also send out to all of your different social media platforms. And then tying it back to the other data points that we talked about earlier, you can now see in Google Search Console if somebody is looking for that particular job. Did they arrive on that page, and did they ultimately complete the goal that you want them to take? So it's really your sort of full circle marketing that really sort of benefits and snowballs into an effect that in the future people will get used to coming to your site to look for available jobs. And if they don't do that, then they're going to Google, and you ideally want to be able to show up for that job listing. So it's really a multi-pronged approach with your job listings and recruiting efforts to really measure the success of what is performing well and what isn't performing well. Because if all is looking good, you can also start to use not only social media, but advertising in order to drive traffic to that page, in order to get applicants directly on that page. And so it's setting up your most important marketing data points and creating that flow on your site first. And it helps to expand and justify adding more budget to your marketing and to your social media and advertising, because you have the flow set up on your website correctly first before you start investing in content marketing and advertising. Too many times I see businesses out here that will jump into investing into content marketing or investing into advertising without making sure that the flow is set up correctly on their site first. So it's really, really a valuable tool that I encourage everybody to get out there and really hone in on the ownership part of your website in order to really capitalize on a lot of the different platforms out there and utilizing those channels as distribution spots that all lead back to your website, where you can control the real estate and you can control the flow that the visitor will take. But make sure you get that flow right on your site first before you start investing in these other strategies. Now, someone who knows a lot about these kind of strategies, let's go ahead and bring in Grace Sharkey. She's a staff writer for FreightWaves and host of the newest show on the platform called Transmission. And she's stellar rock star. I've been looking forward to having this conversation for a while. Welcome in, Grace. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much. I am a huge fan. So honestly, this is like probably my favorite show that I've watched that FreightWaves has brought on, and I am overly excited to be here today. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I mean, the check is in the mail, so I appreciate all of the compliments that you're giving me. But diving into a little bit of your career and where you've sort of come from, I think I just blindly assumed that you just jumped right into journalism and jumped right into writing at FreightWaves, but you've actually spent, I don't want to say, that we've spent a decade in this industry, but because we're not old, we're seasoned
Yeah.
professionals. So now tell us a little bit about how you got started in the world of freight.
Yeah, so honestly, it's been a wild ride. If I went back to myself at like 22, 23 and said, "Hey, guess what? And over a decade from now, you're going to be on an automotive supply chain podcast and writing for a freight media site," I'd be like, "That's the craziest thing I've ever heard." I went to school for college for politics, to be honest with you, and I actually started really learning about freight through fundraising. It sounds odd, but I helped set up different fundraising plans for Clean Water Action, Sierra Club, things of that nature. And then I actually started fundraising for Michigan State. I thought to myself, well, if they won't pay for my tuition, I'll help other people pay for theirs. Well, we'll see. And I had
Team
a really
player.
great career. Yeah, right. I was able to raise over $150,000, probably close to 200,000 for the university. And the funny thing is a lot of the job requirements for that in terms of being on the phone and hearing rejections, because trust me, you hear rejections,
Mm.
especially after we lose on a Saturday. It prepared you for this industry. So Coyote, CH Robinson, a lot of the large companies would come in and recruit us. And I was friends with a lot of people who ended up going into the industry after school. And really, to be very honest, I needed a job that I could make money to start paying my student loans after school. And guess what? Politics and nonprofit work doesn't do that right away. So I took this job at a small 3PL and was attracted to the ability to get into management quicker. And that happened very rapidly. This isn't a hard industry to I don't say hard, but it's not a difficult industry to get sales or acquire sales. Where it really gets difficult is the scaling aspect. So
Mm.
that was really fun for me. It was like, okay, I can really learn how to run a business, be an entrepreneur, and use this experience almost as a beta testing for what I ended up doing with the rest of my life. So that's really how I got started in this.
I love that. It's sort of you're either you have family that's involved in the freight industry and that's how you initially get in, or you just stumble in it by
Yeah,
accident and then all of a sudden you're a lifer and then just you can't
yeah.
escape the grasp of freight. Now, speaking of your first role, and your first role was at Fifth Wheel Freight to include sales and business development, ultimately becoming the chief strategy officer. So what does sort of the day-to-day look like for a CSO? Because I feel like that's a fairly new position, especially in the world
Yeah.
of freight.
Yeah, so I think a lot of my job entailed the scaling aspect. It was
Mm.
very important for someone in my role to know the future and know where we are now, right? Like how are we going to compete 20 years from now and be at the level of revenue that we're hoping to be at. You know, what are hurdles that we're going to have to overcome? Where should we properly prep ourselves? Where investments do we need? What areas do we need to invest in order to compete with the large behemoths that are in this industry? And for me, a lot of it was really sitting with our entry level employees. I always feel like that is the number one place you can go to when you're finding it difficult to pinpoint what is really causing just a grasp on maybe an area that you're trying to control more. For instance, like we're really big on at the time for moving to a buy sell model from cradle to grave, which can be very difficult, but it's easier to relay over to your employees or market to your employees when you actually know the problems that they're dealing with, and you can say, hey, listen, I know you hate check calls. I know you hate having to deal with this carrier minutia. You know, if we we can properly align you up with a better role, we're going to take these headaches away eventually, and show you that you can make more money and be able to just strategize that actual execution in order to help your business reach your goals. It is kind of like a newer type of role when you say that. And I think you're seeing it a lot more because of the technology piece.
Mm.
There are a lot of, I would say, executive level people who in this industry, they get into it for the sales aspect. You know, a lot of them have been in the industry for years as truck drivers. So when it comes to like adding technology into their workflow, it's a difficult conversation, and it takes a lot of investment to get a good
Mm.
outcome or a good ROI. So I think that's why you start seeing that role a lot more.
Well, you brought up my next question because of ROI. Everybody is sort of obsessed with attaching a data point to, ROI or anything that you invest
Yeah.
in. And so, what are some of your favorite ways to measure the strategies that you implemented? You mentioned putting employees in more successful roles that maybe they feel more passionate about. Are there any other aspects of ROI that can be measured in that way?
Yeah. So I actually just did a webinar on this last week. I think a lot of times when people see problems when scaling a business within logistics, their number one go-to move is let's add a person, right? And that does is just double down on the problem. You're just literally making it worse because at some point that person is going to be so overwhelmed they're going to need another point. So a lot of times I think it's difficult to explain to executives that an ROI isn't always a very direct penny level cost. Sure, let's get some data scientists on this and I can show you it. But I think I sent over to you, there's a couple areas that I personally like to focus on because they will lead to better revenue growth and at the end of the day, better margins in the long run. One is the return of time. Time is money. I hate that saying because it's like, duh, but it really is like the number one factor. Whenever you look at any brokerage that's looking to scale, it's really not the return on my investment. It's how can I make the employees, how can I put more time in their pocket? How can I stop these minutia tasks that are slowing them down? Check calls, talking to carriers about just small little things here and there, dealing with mistakes by your shipper, right? So let me show you how much time I'm going to put back into your rep's day. Two, yeah, is the return of happiness. Like I love the meme culture of this industry. I think it's absolutely hilarious. So I'm not putting it down at all. But a lot of the meme culture is like the headaches of this industry, right? Like, got a phone call at midnight, or having to deal with load board issues or things of that nature. That meme culture is there because those small areas like actually make your employees not happy and not enjoy
Hmm.
it. And at the end of it all, if they don't enjoy the industry, they will leave at some point. They'll leave and they'll do some other type of industry. Maybe they go to a competitor with their experience and a smaller competitor and help them grow, but they aren't going to stay there. So it's always best to figure out, okay, in this role, what type of person needs to fill it? What's going to have them enjoy their job, right? A lot of like carrier representatives, they love talking with carriers. They love actually like building a relationship with them, not yelling at them because they're 2 hours late. Well, a system, different telematics and things of that nature, that can fix those problems. Let's put that time back into their day so they can actually ask the carrier, like, hey, how's your family doing? Or how in my notes I put that you just had a son. Like, how is he doing? Can you send me some pictures? That's going to actually build a real carrier relationship. And then to the last one, and I think this one is the most important for small to medium sized brokers, especially, and a lot of shippers, to be honest. What's the return of your carrier? Like, literally, how often are they coming back to your company and taking another load? I think that sometimes is a really shocking figure when companies figure out how to pull that and see, oh, like, most of our carriers have only taken a few loads with us and they've never come back. Okay, like, well, let's figure out why. Why wouldn't they come back? What do we need to improve on to make their experience better? Because you are a broker. You have two people that you have to really make happy. Three, if you count the employees. So those are the areas that I like to focus on the most.
And to piggyback off of that, because when we were originally talking about you coming on the show, we were going to talk about, sort of freight brokers having issues recruiting and the marketing
Yeah.
strategies companies need to adopt in order to bring in more recruits. What are some of your favorite marketing strategies? And are there any companies that we can sort of look towards in order to better enhance our recruiting efforts?
Yeah, so there's definitely companies. I think the biggest thing, and this, I think that there's a generational shift towards this as well. It's just authenticity, like being authentic and being honest about what is going on within your business, right? So a lot of times I still see marketing material with stock images. Like, take pictures of your staff. Like, there
Preach.
has yeah, like right, like first of all,
Drives me crazy.
stop giving these stock image companies your subscription, their monthly subscription rate or whatever it is. Like, just literally walk around and take some professional photos of your employees. And you know what? Like, before you even reach out to professional, like, ask your employees, does anyone here take photos on the side? Like, use what's going on within your employees to like help generate a positive atmosphere in your company. So that's my number one thing, is like, use photos of your employees, because we all know what a stock photo looks like. And I'll be honest, I'm working on a website right now too for my own company. And like, I've got stock images, and every time I go on it, I'm like, God, go outside and take some photos. So like, that's the number one thing I would say, is like, be authentic. Start like and I would do this every single day. But if you're just starting to get into it, like, we start putting them on some type of social media, especially for recruiting. Like, that's a lot of people my age and younger than me. I like to pretend I'm 22, but people 30 and younger, like, I will go to your site to see how you're promoting your employees and that they enjoy their job. If I just see a bunch of clearly scripted materials and stock images, I'm going to just assume that they didn't even want you to take pictures of them. So, like, whether it's you letting, like, take an Instagram story, right? And just have someone from their desk say, I had a great day because Jim Bob Trucking delivered it on time. Like, small things like that to show, like, okay, these guys are making freight fun. There's a reason, like I said, that meme culture exists out there for us. Like, this can be a super cool and fun industry. I think the other one is starting at leadership and letting them be their authentic selves on social media. I can't say it more than I've already said 1,000 times, and I've messaged him myself and let him know, like, Andrew Silver is the god of doing this on LinkedIn. And the one thing I always tell him that I think is giving them a really great return, and this is for Molo, if anyone's wondering, is I see him constantly liking and commenting on, like, entry level employees, different status updates or job promotions and things like that. You have no idea what someone at that level of an executive likes or comments on something, how good and valued that makes an employee
Mm.
feel. Yeah. I always tell him, I'm like, I've seen him do it. Like, just even on, like, I took a job here, and like, he's like, congratulations. Like, I haven't even started this job yet, and the CEO is congratulating me. Like, that is takes 2 seconds out of your day and is going to just amp that employee up with so much positivity. So just be your authentic selves. And if you, let's say you're an executive and you're not like an on-camera person, that is fine. Yeah, and I mean, even if, like, let's say you're like a harder type of person, like Mr. Wonderful doesn't create a bunch of rainbow and butterfly content. He creates Mr. Wonderful content that people still love. So I would just like, this day and age, people just are gravitated toward others being their authentic self.
Right.
Just try something and see what feedback you get. What
So
could
just
happen?
being unapologetically you, investing a little time into encouraging new hires goes a long way. And spend a couple $100 on getting a photographer to come to your office and take pictures of your staff and of your fleet. It really is just that much. It's that much money, and you can use that in all of your future marketing efforts. Because if I see another stock image of a plane flying over a cargo port and that is your header photo on your website, I'm going to scream because it just drives me crazy. So thanks for getting me
Yeah,
off on a little bit of a tangent there. Now,
drives me nuts.
making this now making the switch for you, you come from a company and then you go to a writing position and now you're hosting the show transmission. What is that sort of experience like for you? Because I do think that a lot of leaders and company leaders out there can sort of take a page out of your book, that you went from working within an office to being on camera and hosting your show. What has that transition to transmission been like for you?
Yeah. So I would say, I think I talked to you before about this, like the on camera stuff, like, I don't want to say that comes more natural, but like I've always been that person.
Mm.
My family has this video of us going to Disney World when I was like 4, and I'm obnoxiously annoying, like constantly jumping in frame. Like I cringe when I watch it because I'm like, can someone calm her down? So like the on camera stuff, I'm more than fine with, and I've always really enjoyed public speaking. I think so I have like really high actual anxiety. And I think sometimes like these spaces like really challenge me against that anxiety, that I kind of just
Mm.
like go off. And that's where the authentic aspect of things I think really pays off for people, because there's sometimes where I'm just like, I'm gonna wing it, and like whatever happens happens, and it usually turns out really well. So like push against your anxiety, push against your fears, just do it, and you'd be surprised how good you are on camera just being yourself. Now the journalist side, the writing side, my mom is an English teacher, and I told her for Mother's Day that I have never ever thought that her job was that crazy hard. And the everyone on this team has like completely proved me wrong. I've learned so much in regards to writing since I've been here. And I used to write a lot of papers and stuff in college, but just like how to capture an audience, how to keep that messaging going throughout the full article. Like I'm a tangent person. I think that's why I like video, because I know like worst case I'll just go on a tangent and it'll get back to the beginning somehow. But like you can't do that in an article, like not at all. So I think that's like what the staff has really helped me with, is like, okay, you lost me here. Let's like get it back to the point, or even more so, like push your point up a little higher, so like they continue to read. So I've just learned so much from the editorial team. And I think every single person I've interacted with has taught me something new, and everyone's just been more than open with their feedback. And I'm just so excited to be here, and really like I really have a new respect for journalists, to be honest
Mm.
with you. I've
True.
always, yeah, like I've always been like a huge like into documentaries and stuff like that. And I've noticed over like the last couple months when I watch those like crime documentaries, I'm like way more interested in how like the journalists like went on the pursuit. I just look at it so much differently.
Yes,
uh,
I couldn't agree more, because I think that whenever you're in that in that sphere of creating content, you start paying attention to how somebody else interviews someone, how they structure and set up a story, and then the different, even camera angles that people use. Once you start getting
yes.
those reps, you start seeing it more all around you. So I couldn't agree more. It's a great
Yeah.
perspective on somebody coming into sort of the broadcasting game, because I was the same way. I didn't go to school for this, but here we are, just trying to throw some stuff up against the wall and see if it sticks. All right, we only have a couple minutes left. So what are some
Cool.
of the final question? What are some of the women that you look up to in this industry?
So my number one lady of all time is Lily Shen. I think everything that she touches, it literally turns to gold. Like in my head, she's Queen Midas. Like everything, literally everything. Like go through her resume or her LinkedIn, and you're like, bomb.com company, bomb.com, everything out of the park, home runs. And for someone to have that awesome of a resume, like you sit back and you're like, okay, like this is too good to be true. But like every interview she's done with FreightWaves, she just seems very authentic and very passionate. And then I got the chance to interview Christian Lee, who's their new CFO at Transfix, and I was like, literally, I was like, is she as cool as I assume that she is? And he was like, yes, times 10. So I haven't gotten to do a one-on-one interaction with her, but I'm going to put her up like, very close to Beyonce, and that's huge in my book.
Shoot your
Uh,
shot. That's the best you can do, right?
yes, yes, exactly. So yeah, she for me is a huge one. And then just from like my own experiences, I'm a huge fan of Shelly Simpson at JB. I think that one, in order to really, I feel like she's really taken on the charge of bringing them into the technological revolution. And as not as old, but as legacy as that company is, like that can be very, very difficult to manage and
Yes.
very, very difficult to like get into people's heads. And when I talk to drivers, that is like that platform 60 is one I've never heard complaints on. If anything, it's
Mhm.
always really great things. So what that tells me is she's really good at creating a culture that's willing to listen to carrier feedback, that she has a really great way of implementing technology that I would just love to learn from her. When I see what she's been able to do at that company, and from my experience, I was a lot of that too, like trying to lead the charge of a technology revolution can just like sometimes go over people's heads. So I would love to sit and learn from her at some point in time.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people would love to be able to learn from her, because that was a great article that you shared about some of the top women that are working in freight and logistics. So it was really sort of
Yeah.
inspiring to see some names on the list that I hadn't heard of yet and sort of dive into more of their career. Now,
Mhm.
speaking of your career, where can people find more of your work and follow your journey?
Yeah, so go to freightwaves.com, type in Grace Sharkey, you will get all of my articles there. So that is a great place to start, just to really see the type of material I cover, which is really all over industry, but really try to focus on technology. From there, I am a part of Transmission, which you can get on any type of podcast format that you listen to. And make sure you guys subscribe to that so you're getting updates on our weekly episodes. This week's episode is going to be really, really cool. I could have talked to that guy forever. And also, I am on Instagram, Twitter. You can add me there. I saw your book in the background, but my Twitter handle is Gracie Man LaFreight. So yeah, that's where you can find me at. And feel free to shoot me an email or anything. I love meeting new people in this industry, and I love getting feedback on my articles because I am brand new and I can definitely learn something. So I'm open to it.
Awesome. Well, you may be brand new, but you're definitely one to watch as far as the career is concerned. Thank you so much, Grace, for your time today, and looking forward to watching and reading more of your content that comes out from the FreightWaves platform. Thank you again.
Thank you, wife.
Perfect. All right. Well, what a great interview about hearing from somebody that went from working in an office in order to working where she is now, and that's on the FreightWaves platform, hosting her own show, writing her own articles. Didn't go to school for it, and it's something that you can learn while you're on the job, and that's a really great sort of segue into our next guest. Not necessarily learning on the job, but maybe a little bit of that aspect of it. But we're going to go ahead and bring in Dan Foster. He is the VP of Operations over at StratusGrid, and he's going to break down some of the latest IT infrastructure that's going on in the world, and also how we can protect ourselves from ransomware. But before we dive into sort of those, I guess more important questions, first of all, I want to hear about the cool name and the logo that you guys have. You guys, sent me a little swag bag full of like little gifts, and I love the rocket ship. So I was just wondering where you guys came up with a lot of that different marketing and branding, because I think it's brilliant.
Hey, I saw the rocket, and good afternoon, and thank you for having me, Blythe. It's good to see you again.
Absolutely. Likewise.
So the Stratus part of it is pretty clear. It's kind of cloud. We were a cloud first company, and the branding kind of came around from a very early part of the company around 2009. So Justin Schultz was the founder of StratusGrid, saw how transformative this technology was going to be in the industry, and kind of wanted to focus on that. And it kind of really kind of all centers around taking this into space. So there's lots of terminology about launching So we actually take some new software and we launch it. So that's kind of one of the things. Another part of it is kind of goes around the space industry as a whole, because the space industry has always kind of represented the cutting edge of technology for the most part. So they've got movies about it, how this has always been where all of this is kind of going. So it all kind of worked together in a synergy of like, hey, let's look at the cloud and let's look at this technology and let's see how it's going to just continue to go, and that is pretty well proven accurate. I mean, this is
Awesome.
I think just about everybody can at least talk about the cloud, though they might not really understand what it means.
Well, speaking of the cloud, a graphic that your team put out, it said up to 40 times cloud computing is up to 40 times more cost effective than running in-house IT systems for small to medium-sized businesses. Now, what exactly does that entail as far as, IT infrastructure, and what are some of the basics that people need to keep in mind as their business grows?
So some of the basics, and there's really there's a switch in the way this actually is now working. So it kind of comes from a capital expenditure to an operating expenditure. So when you're a brand new business or you have gotten to a certain point in your growth, or you've outgrown some of your equipment, you have to buy more, right? Or you either are a brand new business and I need to buy something so I can start putting all of my applications. I need to store my files. I need to do whatever. So that has a finite number. That has a number, and you almost have to not guess. That's going to be the wrong word, but you have to find a way to judge how well this is going to serve your company moving forward. Well, when you move over to something like we're an AWS shop, but they're all very similar, where it's a pay as you go. It's very much like a light switch. So you're able to launch all of these applications. You're able to do all the things that you have done traditionally in that closet, but now it's up in the cloud. And whenever you use it, now you're incurring cost. And that just kind of stays that way ongoing. So, what is kind of sometimes I heard Grace talking about ROI, which is a great segue into this. People want to know what that return on investment looks like. Well, you have a continuing cost associated to this that will vary depending on your workload. So if you have to leave the lights on longer, it's going to cost a little bit more. But 3 years from now, you're not going to have that big capital expense of, hey, I've grown so much, I need to get new equipment, or my old equipment is aged out. Now I'm going to have $100,000, $200,000 to get me back up and current.
Hmm. So I know that you can't really speak to, sort of specifics when it comes to, companies, but as a whole, what are some of the IT trends that freight companies are pursuing, or some maybe that they should be pursuing, especially in a post, I guess a post-COVID world is what we're living in now.
Yeah, and that's a great question, Blythe. Thank you so much. That one. So what we're seeing a lot of, and it's not just specific to transportation logistics, but we see this a lot where they're looking to bridge a gap. They find something that is not quite right. I can't have good visibility. Well, here's this one advertisement for this one application. Let me just get that one thing, and this will solve all of my problems. And ultimately, what ends up happening is they'll get it. It'll get implemented into an environment, and it just kind of muddies up the waters. I mean, the people at the bottom level, the people that are actually in the trenches doing the work, they will generally find a way to get through their day to day. And now you just introduce a brand new something just because it looked like the right fit. Sometimes it works, most of the time it doesn't. And what we're hearing a lot of is trying to implement and integrate a lot of these tools. So that will happen multiple times. And then what will end up happening is there will become some level of dependency on that application. And now it has to stay. And now we're going to add another one. And before you know it, you've got 5 or 6 of these. They're all over the place, and they don't really talk with each other, and it just really makes it worse. And
Hmm.
the second part of your question is what should they be doing? And that's a deep conversation, So especially around what has happened over the last couple of weeks with Colonial Pipeline, so that's always on everybody's mind. We have some recommendations. Baselining is a term we like to use. We want to make sure that people are really focused on fundamentals of maintaining their environment. And this is really not new information. There's really no silver bullet to this. You have to have a good solution in place for patching everything. You need to have good backups in place that have been tested. And that's something that is skipped by and large by most organizations where they don't test their backup. So how do you even know if your data is protected? And it needs to be separated from everything else. And some other simple things like that are more common now is like two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. I think you and I have actually had that conversation.
Yes, we
And
have.
yeah, yeah, and uh, and to be honest, and this kind of comes back to my silver bullet. There's no one thing that can be done, but it kind of comes back to being the differences between a hard target and a soft target. These people that are actually coming in trying to get and take advantage of and find people that are vulnerable, if you make it just a little bit harder than that next guy, they will pass you by. This
Mm.
is a job to them. They're going to come in there and they're going to try to find the easiest one. If you've taken some of these steps and it's too tough, they'll just skip you. So, I mean, that's really one of the things you want to get to that baseline and stay on that baseline because they're not necessarily coming after a somebody. They're coming after the easiest target.
That's a great point because it's almost like if you're a robber, are you going to go to the house with the door that's unlocked, or are you going to go to the house with that has the multiple barricades in place where somebody can't reach it? Obviously, you're going to go to the one that has the door unlocked and maybe even just wide open in order to exploit those vulnerabilities. So most of us in sort of the tech world know that if a hacker wants to get in, they will get in. It's not a matter of if, but when. Has StratusGrid ever had to combat against a hack? And if so, what does that sort of, I guess, war room look like when you're actively trying to fight against hackers? I imagine it's like a medieval warfare, but I'm sure it's probably not like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you described it perfectly. I mean, my suit of armor's in the other room. I mean, we suit up and go at it. And I mean, the biggest piece of advice, yes, we've been there, but we don't, specialize specifically in security. But every IT company is a security company, So what we're always saying is if we ever get to that stage, it's you're already in a mess.
Mm.
So the best advice I can give is from the previous comment. Prepare yourself ahead of time, and the most important thing is don't panic. You know, and some of the things that are kind of a little counterintuitive, if it looks like it is something that is legitimate, let somebody know and don't necessarily just close it directly out. I mean, you don't want to just leave it, running indefinitely. Um, but also, if you see it, the damage is probably already done. And if you want to be able to try to reverse that and get somebody to be able to find something, that's the thing.
When you talk about seeing something, say I'm a freight broker sitting, working in my TMS, is what kind of red flags would pop up to make me know that something has gone awry?
So we could talk ransomware is kind of one of the most prolific right now. Is if you have common files that are no longer accessible, you were in it this morning and then all of a sudden you can't get into it. Those are some of the indicators. If you start seeing, uh, you know, unusual slowness in your network, um, like I said, there's so many.
Like a DDoS attack is what happened to
Mhm.
a friend of mine recently. They run a podcasting host or a podcast hosting company, and they were the victim of that. And they refused to pay the hackers, which I thought was brilliant. And sort of on the flip side of what Colonial Pipeline strategy
Mhm.
was, is they just outright paid them and then got their information back. Do you think that paying them is a good idea, or is it sort of like the mantra of we don't do business, we don't negotiate with terrorists? Is that more of the hard line thinking?
Yeah, well, there's some pretty significant differences between a DDoS and a ransomware. Ransomware is exactly what it sounds like. They have it. If they have a successful ransomware against it, they've got your data and it's encrypted. And encrypted, you're just not going to break it. So it really comes down to that's where your backups and test restorals come into play, and that's where I don't know this for sure. I mean, I've been keeping an eye on Colonial just having been in the industry as long as I have, that's it. I mean, if they don't have a good backup, they don't have many options, you know.
Oh, wow.
And so if they've got your operational data, you have to have that operational data. It's not going to be broken. Uh, we don't have international cybersecurity laws that are really enforced. That's why you see a lot of this is happening from outside of the United States. So the cyber world doesn't have borders, you know. So that's why it's they'll perpetuate from Russia, China, Korea, and there's really not a whole lot of options to do. That's why you have to get in front of it. You have to be that harder target, and you have to be prepared that everything is lost. You know, so that's why it is just critical that you have a good solution in place to combat this. You know, before it ever happens, if they ever get you, you're gone.
True.
And a DDoS, you know, is a slightly different. That is, you know, a denial of service. They just keep sending you things. Well, that can actually be mitigated generally by, you know, like an ISP, an internet service provider. They are able to kind of shut that off to the side, and it happens relatively quickly, you know, again, but that's not necessarily impacting your data. That's just impacting people's ability to get to it. You know, if that makes
So
sense.
so it does. It makes a ton of sense. So you mentioned keeping your baseline and getting out in front of it by keeping backups of your data and of your information, and then also being able to have a quality provider that can protect you from that in the future. But what about as far as the current landscape of freight technology? Where do you sort of see it evolving in the next 5 years or so? Which is, I know, is an eternity in the in the tech space, but maybe, give us a few ideas of where the freight industry is evolving.
Yeah, what we're actually seeing in the freight industry, and this is an area that is largely been kind of not ignored, but they don't adopt technology as quickly as we see in other industries. And what we're starting to see now is that there's starting to become quite an enthusiasm around technology and how it's actually helping to impact positively into this industry. So generally speaking, and this has been forever and ever, amen, is that ROI around IT. And most business owners, again, this isn't specific to transportation and logistics. It's a very expensive, and it just looks like a cost center. And oftentimes, like, well, I don't want to drop the money into that. You know, that's just too expensive. And it really comes down into IT security. And I've said it for years that IT is expensive. IT security is even more so, and it's really sometimes can be a bitter pill to drop all of this money into IT security, and the intent is for nothing to happen. So that's that's hard. I mean,
It is,
so I
it's
mean,
very difficult, I think, for a
yeah,
lot
like
of companies to face that.
yeah.
And
So like you,
so learning all of the things that we've learned from about StratusGrid today and sort of IT infrastructure and protecting yourselves against ransomware, I wanted to kind of take it in a slightly different direction, because I know that you have an extensive military background, and I, years ago, had the opportunity to participate in the Navy's DV Embark program, where I got to land, I got to take off and stay the night on an aircraft carrier, which is an incredible experience and gave me a whole new appreciation for military service men and women. And I know that since you've had a lengthy military career and with Memorial Day coming up, I just kind of wanted to give you the opportunity to speak on what service has meant to you.
yeah, and I appreciate that. And what's actually kind of surprising, I saw a note that you had sent me about that. Is you were on uh, the Harry
The
S. Truman.
Truman. Yeah.
I'm Air Force. I'm retired Air Force, did 20-year career. So it's unusual for me to have ever landed on an aircraft carrier, but I have also landed on that aircraft carrier. You
Oh,
know,
nice.
yeah,
Small world, I
yeah,
guess. Or
absolutely.
small carrier world.
Yeah, yeah. This was actually off. Actually, maybe it had been the Theodore Roosevelt. Anyway, I also landed on a carrier, and that was one of my highlights of my Air Force career, is being able to do that. So that was pretty fantastic. So I am aware, and I appreciate you giving me the time to talk about that. So I've now actually been retired for almost 8 years. It seems kind of surreal that the vast majority of my youth was spent there, and I look back on it very fondly. There's obviously not great times, but also some really transformative times. And I learned a lot, and had some very impactful people in my life that continue to be. Um, and what I really wanted to kind of bring from that, and continue to strive here, and something from your previous guest, Grace, was when she was talking about the authenticity of the people. That's really what I want to try to take some of that time, not militant, not, everybody has to be here at one time, but there was a sense of camaraderie, a sense of teamwork, and being able to have that trust of, if I hand something over to the person next to me, I have the utmost belief that that will be picked up and handled. And I've got all the support behind me and I've got the support of my leaders. I want to bring that here. I want to kind of bring that internally and try to build those teams. So that's one of the things that I really love and miss.
Appreciate that sentiment, especially with Memorial Day coming up. All right, Dan, where can people find more about StratusGrid and all of the work you guys do?
I'm really excited to hear from everybody, and I'd love for people to send us an email at sales@stratusgrid.com, and I will have my guys reach out. And if y'all have questions, please don't hesitate. We are quite passionate about just trying to help. We want to be helpful in this industry, and we really want to have these conversations. So if there's anything about this that caught someone's attention and they just want to, like, hey, do you mind just talking to me about it further? We would be happy to.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you, Blythe. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you guys so much for joining in on this episode of Cyberly. Be on the lookout for next week's episode when we are right back at our normal time slot. Thank you again and happy Memorial Day.